We have fun here, except for a day like today, as we learn that Milan Lucic will somehow play a game more recently for the Boston Bruins than Patrice Bergeron.
I think that's why he retired. He's like, I don't want that dude back. Fuck this.
What do you mean I won't be the most handsome person on the team anymore? God damn it. So, I'll say this, right? 38 years old. One hell of a career. Again, he's not dead. He just stopped playing a sport for a living. The departures and subsequent retirements of Tom Brady and Zdeno Chara helped prep me for this a little bit more. I think had those two not happened and this happened to lead it off, this would have been the real rough kind of moment as a Boston sports fan in terms of the idea of, era's coming to an end. We could leave this entire segment, like this could be 5 seconds. Future first ballot Hall of Famer. Bam, let's talk about something else. We could leave it at that, and I'd like to think that's not me just being a Bruins homer. He is, though, and this is where people could call me a Bruins homer, the greatest defensive forward in the history of the NHL. That is a fact. To me,
It's hard to argue
at least.
with that.
A 12-time finalist for the Selke. 6-time winner.
Yeah.
We've joked about it forever. The award should be named after him, and I think it will be.
They'll probably
Because I
probably
don't-
hyphenate it like Selke Bergeron. Yeah.
I could see that. I could see that. It's funny though because again, it wouldn't be disrespectful to Frank J. Selke.
You didn't even play.
He wasn't a player though. Like he wasn't. He was a Hall of Fame general manager. Like, dude, he was a 9-time Stanley Cup champion. I can see why you would want an award named after Frank Selke, but at the same time, it doesn't really fit. Like you have Executive of the Year awards, GM of the Year awards. No disrespect to Jim Gregory, but it's better suited. It would almost be like the what would even be a comparison? The Tuukka Rask Forward of the Year goes to Ryan Getzlaf. Like, what the fuck? It just doesn't make sense. This sucks. That's what this is for me. Like, this sucks.
There's going to be so much pushback over changing it, even though they should, just because hockey hates any form of change ever.
Yeah. No, you're not wrong. I honestly don't think it'll happen, but I do think that it should.
It'll happen after he dies, maybe. Like, as sad as that is, I'm sorry. But, like, I don't know. Yeah, hockey's shit in that way.
It is. What's funny, though, is Go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, while we're on the subject of, greatest defensive forward in the NHL history, I think there are some others who definitely deserve shouts. It's a hard thing to gauge. I would not disagree that he's the best defensive forward in the NHL. But there's some other who is really good. I think people forget how fucking good Rod Brindamore was as an offensive centerman. He was, like, absolutely incredible. Pavel Datsyuk. Everyone remembers his deeks. He was a ridiculous defensive center. Like, he was so good, so slick. He would lift your stick from behind, take it, and go the other way and work some magic. Like, and those are a couple that I could think of off the top of my head. But
Kings fans will shout from the rooftops about Anze Kopitar, and rightfully so. I mean, honestly, I do think if there was a claim of Western bias in terms of not getting the respect they deserve, Anze Kopitar. At the same time, I do think it is a legitimate shout to say that in every sport, there are great players who don't get the acknowledgement that they deserve and that they would have if one person didn't exist. Like, if it wasn't for Patrice Bergeron, Anze Kopitar, Mark Stone, players like this would have numerous Selkies, I would say. It's just, unfortunately for them, their careers lined up with Patrice Bergeron's. Bob Gainey as well. He is the guy that Bergeron kind of usurped. He was a 4-time winner of the Selke Trophy. 4 consecutive years, 78 to 81. and is also a Hockey Hall of Famer inducted in 1992 that most people look at in that conversation. There are obviously plenty of others, but just the fact that at least for me in this conversation, regardless of whether or not you think Bergeron is, he is in that class and in that conversation with the incredible talent that was also named, which says a whole hell of a lot. Even if you don't think he's the very best, he is in that conversation. In terms of his resume continued, I mean, obviously there'll be a lot about the leadership. He won a Messier Leadership Award. I mean, he was a letterman for the Bruins since 2006, 2007, captain of the team for the last 3 seasons. And again, for a second round pick, it's funny because at the time, I don't want to say it's like a direct comparison with like Tom Brady in a sense, because obviously 6th round pick versus 2nd round pick. But Bergeron was very quickly looked at as the guy that has to step into the shoes of Joe Thornton. Like immediately upon that Joe Thornton trade, it was a 2nd round center where it's like, well, what can this kid be? Reason for that is a lot of people forget 2005 World Juniors. He was the MVP for gold medal Canada. Not the last time he would win gold with Canada. 2010 and 2014 at the Olympics. It's just crazy how you can look back after that trade and it's like, okay, well, the Bruins have David Krejci, they have Phil Kessel, but I feel like for the most part, it was immediately the second Joe Thornton was traded, it's, hey, Bergeron's got to be the guy. And that is immense pressure to live up to when that Thornton trade was highly, highly criticized right at the gates, as it should have been.
It aged horribly, too. It was bad when it happened, and it aged worse.
Yeah, it did.
Because I always forget the third guy, but I remember that it was Wayne Primo.
Yep.
Marco Sturm, who, to be fair, was a solid goal scorer type.
He was good.
Who the fuck was the other one? It wasn't
Brad
Tom
Stewart.
Pricing. Was it Brad Stewart?
Brad Stewart, and within a year or 2 tops, he was in Detroit, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah. Like he was still a good defenseman at that time.
Mm-hmm.
But my goodness, what Thornton became for the Sharks was. Whew.
Yeah, we're gonna talk about Joe in a second, actually, because I saw something on Twitter earlier regarding you, actually.
Yeah.
But all the talk about like the leadership qualities as well of Patrice Bergeron, a former Clancy winner. The thing that stands out, a lot of clips shared today on Twitter, on Reddit, even of like the past season or two. The clip circulating of him lining up on a face-off with Tage Thompson and asking Tage Thompson, like his wife was going through a health issue, and asking about that. The way that he handled the Bruins locker room after the Kyle Beach story broke, where it was his call to sit down and watch the full Kyle Beach interview and have the entire room talk about it. Just like the nickname of St. Patrice is out there for a reason. I mean, it's a gem of a player, but an even bigger gem of a person. He is one of 4 players in Bruins franchise history to score at least 1,000 points. He passed Phil Esposito, who had 1,012 earlier on this season, to hit the mark of 1,040 in his career, 1,040 points. Only trails Ray Bourque at an absurd 1,506.
Jesus.
And the Chief Johnny Busick at 1,339. Bergeron also only trails those 2 in games played as a Bruin, and it's those latter 3 and Bobby Orr that are on the Bruins Mount Rushmore. I mean, really, like as much as I'd love to throw Zdeno Chara on there, I don't think you can get away with not putting Bobby Orr on a Mount Rushmore, but that just shows kind of the company that Patrice Bergeron has. Also 3rd all-time in scoring behind only Busick and Phil Esposito. Like, it's just, you look at the Bruins record books, he is up there. in what you would expect him to be up there for. And one of the biggest conversations and talking points today about Bergeron has been 2011. Won Stanley Cup. He scored the cup clinching goal in Vancouver in Game 7, but it's bittersweet. And I saw you respond to somebody on Twitter, Sin, essentially saying, like, the prevailing thought from Bruins fans is thank God for 2011, but at the same time, haunted is the only way to describe this fan base over the past decade. Because of 2013, losing to a juggernaut Chicago team in 6 on your home ice, 17 seconds. They should have at least forced Game 7. They took their foot off the gas and Chicago killed them for it. Rightfully so. You can't take anything away from Chicago, but that's a thought where it's like, if that goes 7, could that have been Cup number 2 for Bergeron, for Chara, etc.? Then 2019 happens. Game 7, home ice, St. Louis 4-1. If I'm not mistaken, that was the final score. I try to forget that 7th game, but they just completely laid an egg on home ice, and that was the thought, too, of like, okay, 2013 probably should have happened. 2019, was this the last chance? And then this season happens. Best regular season team of all time, and they lose in the opening round. And that's how Patrice Bergeron's career ends. And I said on this show, once that happens, you know, it's a shame if that is how his career ends. And now we know that, yeah, that is the case. With the team failing to live up to their potential yet again, I am still, and probably will forever be, a little bit salty and hostile towards Jim Montgomery because he got it wrong at the worst possible time. Playing an injured Linus Ullmark. I mean, shit, even Bergeron was hurt. You could argue whether or not he should have been in. There was another major injury, if I'm not mistaken, and I can't quite remember. But at the same time, they did win, and that was kind of your point, is, you know, you got to see your favorite players of an era come and go, and they didn't even get the one.
Yeah.
Not to rub it in.
No, you're exactly right. Like, that's all I ever wanted. I wanted that so bad. And like the big chance was 2016. And that you just had the feeling like this is it. And it was. I mean, we had a kind of close chance in 2019 losing in the conference finals to the fucking headshot and Blues, but
who knows? Hey, same.
Yeah. Yeah.
Same.
Like, I don't think we beat Boston though if we get to the Cup Finals that season though. Who knows? But again, who knows? It's so hard to predict things. Matchups are weird in the sense there's so much rock paper scissors type things that go into different teams and how they play against other teams and things like that. But I remember we had so much issues with the Bruins every time we played them. But yeah, 2016 was the big chance, and it's fucking Crosby and the Penguins. Mm-hmm. Still prime fucking Crosby, prime Malkin, and an absurd Penguins team that was just so fast, and they played a different game. Like, I just feel like they played such a different game than anyone else, and no one else could keep up and handle it. Like, they not only had that speed and skill, but they had the drive and determination to actually win. Yeah.
Now we're both bummed out.
Yeah, looking back on that, it's like, yeah, you knew that was the chance because both Thornton and Marlowe at the time were in their mid-30s. It's like, this is it, and yeah.
Overall, in regards to Bergeron's retirement, the response around the league is 99-1 positive. You are seeing posts from fellow, former teammates, either from this past season or a little bit further down the road. You are seeing posts from teams, rival teams especially. Montreal, Sidney Crosby released a statement that the Penguins Twitter put out. It's a 99-1 ratio in terms of positive, that 1% being the actuallys who have to go out of their way to try and be like, no, he wasn't that good. Which is funny because the biggest example of that is probably Mark Madden, who is a Pittsburgh guy. And the parallels of Patrice Bergeron and Sidney Crosby almost having their careers ended at a very young age are eerily similar. But I get it. Someone retires and you can't let them have their roses. You got to be like, yeah, he was good. Our guy's better, though. That's just how some people are going to be, unfortunately. That would be like when Sidney Crosby retires. It's like, yeah, but Wayne Gretzky, though, he wasn't quite Wayne Gretzky, though. It's like, he was fucking Sidney Crosby. He didn't have to be Wayne Gretzky. And Patrice Bergeron didn't have to be Sidney Crosby. He's fucking Patrice Bergeron. But again, most of that's probably for clicks, engagement, and getting their name out there. So, hey, it's, succeeded in that regard. And the real funny thing to me, though, is that if he didn't retire, he was a UFA. If he left the Bruins this offseason and signed with any of the other 31 teams, all 31 fan bases would have been jacked.
Oh, absolutely.
Because he did not leave as a shell of his former self. He still left as a very, very useful player, a very strong player. Yeah. So I just find that funny in a sense. And again, that's also the bittersweet nature of it, because you're happy for the guy to leave the game on his terms. He's got a family, and he gets to walk away from the game rather than being kicked out of it, which, some players don't go down that path, and it gets kind of sad to watch them just turn into shells of their former selves. It really, it's just one of those things where, like I said, bittersweet's the perfect word, but in terms of what he meant to that Bruins franchise, he such just a huge part of that organization, and going forward, I'm sure he still will be too. There are at least 2 jersey retirement ceremonies in the next 5 years at TD Garden. It'll be for Zdeno Chara and Patrice Bergeron, and if it was up to me, you'd add Tuukka Rask as a guarantee to that, among others. I mean, Jesus, Brad Marchand's still an active player. I wouldn't be surprised if he got his number retired in the next 10 years or so once his career's done. That said, I can wax poetic about Patrice Bergeron all day. My favorite player of all time by the end of it. I had, whenever people would ask me that on Twitch, it's like, oh, who's your favorite player at this point? Growing up, it was Ray Bourque, because my dad, kneeled at the altar of Ray Bourque.
Yeah.
But, for me, it's like, okay, as I grow up, who is that player in my formative years? And, from a Bruins perspective, it was Joe Thornton. And then Joe Thornton gets traded when I'm 11 years old. And it's like, well, now who's the guy? Yep. And that's where Bergeron steps in. And then, of course, they bring in guys like Chara and Mark Savard and such. But yeah, like I said, the Brady Chara departures and retirements help a lot. I am so fucking thankful I don't have to see him wear another team's uniform, though. Holy hell. The fact that he stayed a lifelong Bruin. The only way it wouldn't have hurt is if he went to the Habs. But at the same time, he wasn't a Habs fan. He was a Nordiques fan. So it wouldn't have even been he's going home. It's not like he was going to go to his childhood team. It's not like he had Montreal bed sheets. But the nature of this news, on the flip side of the coin, you have what this means now for the Bruins. Fuck. It's the first word that comes to mind, because I can't be overly optimistic right now for what it means, because that is someone's skates who, how the hell do you fill them? Right now, Cap Friendly has, as of July 12th, so it's a little bit out of date, I'm sure, they have this as the Boston Bruins depth chart. Top line, Brad Marchand, David Pasternak, Pavel Zacha as the center, who did have a very good season for the Bruins last year, 57 points. Former, sixth? He was a 6th overall pick, by the way, in 2015. Yeah, he was taken 3 spots ahead of Timo Meier. And Mikko Rantanen was 10th.
Yeah, I know that. I remember that.
Yeah. Zacha had a great season last year. Do I expect him, coming off of a career season, to be able to jump from middle six to being that top line guy? It's scary. It's an unknown. Maybe. I mean, shit, it's tough to imagine someone not doing well next to Brad Marchand and David Pastrnak. The second line, again, Cap Friendly could be wrong. Don't shoot the messenger. James Van Riemsdyk, Charlie Coyle, and Jake DeBrusk.
You got JVR, I forgot.
Yeah, for 1 year, $1 million. At 34 years old.
Who was the middle? Sorry.
Charlie Coyle.
Oh, yeah, because there's no Krejci guarantee.
Mm-hmm. That's the other X factor is David Krejci.
Yeah, you need a 1C because it's really good if Coyle and Zacha are the 2 or 3 Cs. Like, that's really good. But you need a 1C.
They need to be all in on someone like Mark Scheifele.
Is he a free agent?
He has 1 year left with the Jets.
Yeah, but you can get Tomas Hertl instead.
I fucking wish. Scheifele has 1 year left at 6'1", 30 years old. Another name that's out there, Elias Lindholm for the Calgary Flames, and not knowing quite what they're going to be looking to do. He is also a pending UFA after this upcoming season. He's making just under $5 million at 28.
So no matter what, it's going to be some kind of trade that you need to do because the free agency market was already barren.
Yeah, right now in terms of free agents, and allow me to get the list up there. Honestly, I want to sort this because RFA is fucking irrelevant because nobody ever offer sheets anybody.
No.
But Trevor Zegras is currently out there as an unsigned center who could be offer sheeted. That's not going to happen because the NHL is silly. But in terms of UFAs, the highest scoring center, who is currently a UFA from last season, is David Krejci. Second is Jonathan Taves. And third is Eric Stahl. They essentially have to look, if they are going to try to improve this team down the middle, they do have to look from the outside in. The other 2 centers right now, third line listed as Morgan Geekie, who of course was a UFA. They signed him. He played with the Kraken last year. He got 2 years, $2 million. And then Patrick Brown, who has been a fringe NHLer, formerly with the Flyers. I think he played somewhere else too. To your point, if you can shift Zacha down to second line, Coyle to third line, Geekie to fourth, you're looking good. Even if whoever you get isn't quite Patrice Bergeron, it looks a lot better because the defense is still really solid. Right now, penciled in as Grzelcyk, McAvoy, Lindholm, Carlo, Forbert, and Shattenkirk, Ullmark, and Swayman. Granted, Swayman is still currently an RFA, but Ullmark and Swayman are still there as the goaltenders. It would make you think that a trade would be necessary to move out somebody like maybe even a Derek Forbert making $3 million on the third pair. Another X factor is that David Pasternak's new extension kicks in. You remember how much he's getting paid?
11.
Yep, 11 and a quarter. So their cap situation is a little bit interesting, but yeah, I don't think you could really look to be like, oh yeah, Oscar Steen, Mark McLaughlin, John Beecher, like they're gonna step up. It's just not. That's not gonna happen. So yeah, I'm definitely intrigued to see if there is somebody they can go out and get. I mean, free agents next season, Austin Matthews, which I think everyone still expects him to stay in Toronto.
Plus, he's going to be asking for so much money.
Yeah, I don't think you could afford Matthews and Pasta at the same time. I don't think you could.
You can't. Or else, unless you want to become Toronto, and you don't want to become Toronto.
Steven Stamkos, but he is currently 34, so he'll be 35 when he hits the open market. If he hits the open market, that's not the solution. And then there's Mark Scheifele. Sebastian Aho. His deal will be up at the end of next season. He'll be a UFA. And then Elias Lindholm. I mean, you're kind of looking at the only real solutions coming down the pipeline, unless you want to, I mean, again, like Matt Duchene or Matt Duchene's 33. It really is like, okay, either you're fully confident in the guys that you have, or it is going to be a trade for someone like Mark Scheifele or Elias Lindholm to try and bolster up that center depth. It's a really, really weird spot for them to be in moving forward, especially like you said too, like David Krejci's not there. It's a little bit scary. And the last kind of thing to note is who's the next captain? And a lot of people have speculated about that. Obviously, Brad Marchand's name has been thrown out there. I hate to say it. Brad Marchand's 35 years old. He would be another. Exactly. He's another short-term option. There's David Pastrnak at 27, but
he doesn't strike me as a captain guy. I don't know why.
Right. It kind of, yeah. I mean, how often is it that Patrick Kane was never the captain in Chicago?
Especially because Pastrnak, I didn't really like his playoff effort. At times, like he used to get a little fucking. He would start getting all pissy when his shots weren't going in and stuff like that. And that's not to say like I don't know.
Body language is a thing. It is.
Yeah, like there's something about him that struck me as just not a captain. Like when I think about him, like he's just not a captain. Same way that Patrick Kane is just not a fucking captain, obviously. Or who else? I don't know. There's probably some other good examples, but yeah, like it was just there's some things like that. And whereas I could see Marchand being the captain, but like you said, he's 35 because dude, that guy was a beast in the playoffs, and he's still such a good player. But to me, I think if you're looking to take the Bruins team in this new direction, you got to give it to McAvoy.
He's the guy. He is. I mean, he signed through 2030 at $9.5 million. I mean, that's the guy. 100%.
Yeah, he's so good. He's just like such a two-way beast. Like,
yeah,
give it to another two-way beast. This time a defenseman, McAvoy.
Yeah. I think it has to be him. And it's funny because you can look and the NHL, it's a little bit hit or miss right now in terms of like, okay, is the most skilled guy the captain? It's a little bit more hit or miss than I would have thought. Like Buffalo has like Kyle Okposo, obviously not the most skilled player on the Sabres.
It's going to be Tuck after him too, and he's not the most skilled player there.
Right, exactly. At least it should be Tuck.
It should. If it isn't Tuck, what the hell are they doing?
I know. Carolina has Jordan Staal. Colorado, their captain is still officially Gabriel Landeskog. You could argue whether or not it'll get moved to Nathan McKinnon because Landeskog's career is perhaps in jeopardy. Columbus's captain, Boone Jenner.
Still?
Yeah.
Forgot he's still playing, man. Holy shit.
But yeah, then you have like, okay, Connor McDavid's a captain. Steven Stamkos, Ovechkin. The Rangers captain is Jacob Trouba.
Oh, God. Oh, Trumba.
Oh, Jacob Trumba. Yeah, like I said, I could keep going about this. Today's just a really fucking weird day. And, I feel like most fan bases, every fan base has this moment where it is a legendary player for their franchise. And sometimes not. There's the crossover as to whether or not they're also going to be viewed as a legendary player in the NHL. And again, for me, Patrice Bergeron is a Hall of Famer. There's no frustration towards him about not coming back for one more season. I mentioned the idea, dude, his career could have been ended so much sooner. And it is that kind of idea of like I said, of the Crosbys, the Bergerons, these guys have had major injury scares, and it's more of a thankfulness to know that they were able to bounce back and still kind of hit those peaks respectively.
And I actually wonder how much like his past injuries went into his decision here. Because, like you said, he can clearly play and still play at a high level. Like, at worst, he's a 2C. Like, that's how good he still is, in my opinion. And, I think maybe some of his injury passed, and he just wants to, have the best quality of life going forward. He just seems to be such a really, like, obviously a great person, but he seems to be very much in tune with like himself. Because that's what it takes to be like a good person and actually look to help people and things like that, as he clearly has. Like, he's clearly very in touch with himself and introspective. Otherwise, he doesn't ask about people's families. He doesn't sit people down to watch the Kyle Beach interview, and he's not as good of a person if you don't look at yourself first before the world around you. So, yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, again, four kids at home. It's the idea of
Jesus. He has 4.
Yeah.
Oh my God. Yeah.
It's one of those things too where it's like
he'll come out of retirement like Brady. Fuck, it's too tiring.
Oh God, I have to spend that much time with them. But no, I mean, it's just one of those things too, right? Like, especially too in hockey, we've obviously had these conversations about players hanging on for too long and what they've had to do to themselves to chase the dream and to hang on. And these players see these stories, and for some of them, the juice is still worth the squeeze. But for him at this point, it wasn't. And I'm sure, he's had his long list of injuries, but it still feels like at this point, obviously we don't know his full freaking medical history, but at this point, he should still have the health to be able to be a dad in the way that he wants to be a dad, as opposed to being another one of these stories of a former hockey player where it's like, yeah, I can barely play with my kids because I'm so broken down. And that
Sorry. Yeah.
Sorry. No, it's okay. And that would suck, obviously.
Yeah. Like, Jumbo played into his 40s, but when you think back, he never ever had a concussion in his career that I can think of. The only major injury that he ever had were like to his knees. And while, yes, those are scary, like, speed was never a huge part of his game either. So it's like, he didn't necessarily, I mean, you think back to the Bergeron thing, punctured lungs and shit, like, holy crap. Like, there's some intense injuries for him. So, like, people can't try to compare it to someone like that or someone else who played into their 40s, like a Yager or something like that. Like, Yager's a fucking machine, and I'm pretty sure he was single, wasn't he? Or at least kidless. Is he probably still kidless? I don't even know.
Yeah, he's not married. So.
No, he was one of those weird savants where he had one fucking thing that he cared about. Like, it's different. People gotta understand it's different. Everyone's different in a variety of ways when it comes to the physical, variables or the life variables.
You mentioned the injuries for Bergeron. I mean, again, like, he was out with a herniated disc in his back for a portion of the series against the Panthers. That, again, he sustained that injury in the final game of the season against Montreal, and people were pissed. It's, oh, why did he play? Why did he risk it? But again, he played so that his dad could see him play, because his dad, that's probably another factor as well. Like, his dad hasn't been in great health. But yeah, you mentioned the punctured lung. Game 6, 2013 final. He played through a punctured lung, separated shoulder, had a broken rib, and a broken nose, and still fucking played in the Stanley Cup final.
Yeah, that's crazy.
It is. It's like, on one hand, you don't want to sit there and praise that too much, because that's kind of the idea of, like, Jesus Christ, when's enough, and how injured do you have to be before the next guy in the lineup is actually better than you? But at the same time, it's that toughness that, makes him memorable. So, again, I could sit here and talk about Patrice Bergeron for another 6 hours. Very intrigued to see what the future has for the Boston Bruins. And
I am too. Do they have their first next year? Just in case.
Do they even have their own first next year? I think they do.
I know they didn't have it this season.
Right? Oh God, they don't have their first next year.
Yeah, well, you need to do something.
That's right.
Because if you miss the playoffs, that's going to hurt.
Fuck, Detroit has it because of the Tyler Bertuzzi trade.
Oof.
And then there's something in regards to that as well, where I think there's another condition on it. It could end up with Detroit or Boston or someone else or some shit like that. But yeah, that could make a Scheifele trade a little bit more difficult when this year, 2024, they don't have a pick until the 4th round.
Yep, that's tough.
It's been a good era, everybody. I'm going to remain somewhat optimistic.
I can interest you in a Logan Couture. And all it'll cost you is Swayman and that center prospect kid you got.
Honestly, I'd almost be down for it. Just fucking go for it one more time. Why the hell not? I'm here for it. Go until the wheels fall off. And I want to see Couture on a good team again before he's too old. Well, he should have been on a good team in the first place, but the Bruins took Zach goddamn Hamill instead.
Hey,
there you go.
He was on a great team until the last couple of years. How dare you?
For those playing Tukey's Take Podcast Bingo at home, we have mentioned the 2007 draft. I will not mention the one from a few years later, though. I won't. I'll reference it, but I won't mention it.
Have we talked about Kyle Connor recently?
Bastard.
Speaking of Mark Scheifele.
God. You know what's bad when I'm having to be like, yeah, he might be a locker room cancer, but come on down, Mark Scheifele, or God damn it, it's gonna be a bad season.